As a wargamer and somebody who plays war games sometimes with other people too, I know a large number of armchair generals. You probably know the expression. If not, I think you can figure out what it means. Now, there's one category of armchair experts that I know that outnumbers the generals, and that is armchair Hitler killers. Everybody seems to know how to kill Hitler much more efficiently than the people that tried to do it back in history, and they didn't succeed. But why didn't they try that? It would have been so easy if only they did this or did that. Well, now, my dear armchair Hitler killer, you get a chance of testing your hypothesis, of testing your brilliant plans by playing Black Orchestra. This is a cooperative game, can also be played solo, in which all players are conspirators that are going to travel around Germany and Europe, collecting different things that they need, making connections, boosting each other's motivation, and try at the same time to keep a low profile until the right moment presents itself, the stars are right, and they can try to take out the evil villain, which is no less than Hitler in this game. So, cooperative game, soloable also, very interesting theme. Maybe for some of you will be controversial because there is a representation of Hitler, but we're trying to kill him, so I think we're fine. Without further ado, Black Orchestra. This is the board of the game. A fairly large area of the board is covered with player aids that remind players of how things work. And then, very important, we have Hitler's military support. Depending on how difficult we want the game to be, we're going to place a token there to indicate the starting and minimum level of support. For example, for a hard game, the starting and minimum will be hard, will be 4, and there will be game effects that will raise and lower the Q, but it can never go past below the starting level. And suppose we want to be not so masochistic, and so we're going to do standard. Then here we have the main area of the board divided in spaces that are connected by lines such as the ones that you see here. Here we have a special area which is Berlin. In order to move in and out of Berlin, the pawns representing the players need to go through the train station. But once they're there, then they can jump in any area of Berlin, and also the areas within Berlin, they count all as adjacent to one another. At the beginning of the game, we place these tokens here face down. They represent different items that the players may collect during the game and that they will need to be able to complete their plots. And they're shuffled, placed face down, so we don't know where they are. Also, you will see that there are some special effects that are related, that are linked to specific areas on the board, and these become available only when the item placed on the area is removed. Then, of course, we have the bad guys. We have several deputies that will be pretty scary. They all have negative effects. And then, of course, we have the wizard, the evil villain himself, Hitler. These deputies and Hitler himself will move around the board constantly during the game. And so you need to try to catch the bad guy when you have all that is required to attempt to kill him. Up there we have 7 event decks, event card decks. At the beginning of the game, you shuffle all the decks separately. You remove 2 from each deck, so you never know exactly what you're going to get. And then at the end of each player's turn, the active player will draw an event and simply resolve it. And so we'll go through phase 1, phase 2, etc., etc. The game may have up to 7 phases. Now, you may have noticed that the spaces on the board have numbers, and so these represent areas that unlock throughout the game. Basically, the players during the game can be in Berlin and or in areas that have a number equal to or lower than the current phase. At the beginning, during phase 1, they can be in here or these areas here, and then basically the board opens up with an exception. Eastern Europe in phase 7 is unavailable because at that point Germany has lost it, and so the players cannot visit it anymore. And then we have the heroes themselves, the conspirators. They are different from one another. They are based on historical figures. And what do we have here? They each have a player age, a player component such as this one, which is used to keep track of, well, the items that they collect. There is a limited number of items that they can have. The level of motivation, the players' characters or start the motivation at a timid motivation. At the beginning of the game, they're all timid, they're not sure, they're like, I don't know, let's give this Hitler guy a chance. Maybe he's not as bad as he sounds. Oh, he is. So during the game, things will happen, and the players will have to try to increase their commitment to the cause, because then different effects will be available. At the beginning of the game, they can only have 2 cards, 2 of these resource cards, which really are the heart of the game. They represent special actions you can take. Some are illegal if you're caught with these when there's a random check, and the random check shows that there is a Gestapo raid, then you have to discard them or you become more suspicious. Also, these are the plots. You will need to collect plots and to have, well, when you want to try to win the game, you need to perform a plot by resolving the effects on the card itself. So these cards are super mega important. And at the beginning of the game, you're not that committed to the cause, so you can only have 2 such cards. Then as your motivation increases, you become skeptical, then you can have a larger hand of cards. When you are motivated, you unlock a special effect. For example, now the hand of that character increases and the character will draw extra cards. When this character is motivated, he's unaffected by Hitler and deputy penalties. Also, for an action, he can add a die to plot attempt. So just different effects. Here we have a theologian that can raise the motivation of other players. If the motivation increases to committed, that is when the players can actually attempt to kill Hitler. Again, by using a plot card like the ones that I showed you and the necessary resources, you roll dice and you can try to defeat Hitler. Finally, you may be reckless. That doesn't give an intrinsic advantage, but for the fact that there are several plots that are available only. You can perform only if you're truly reckless. Now, what happens here is that during each turn, at the beginning of a turn, you have to check to see if you are in an area with Hitler and or with his deputies, because again they do different things. And if you start a turn in an area with a deputy or with Hitler, you simply resolve the negative effect described on it. You may have to discard a card or to discard a card. They love to do that. You can conspire when the guy's there. That's a special action. Your motivation goes down if you start in the same space with Hitler because it's kind of terrifying. So first during your turn, you check for Hitler and deputy penalties. Then you can take up to 3 actions and you have a lot of freedom, a lot of variety in the things that you can do in different order, repeating the same action several times if you had the resources. Very flexible turn structure in a certain sense. If you play Pandemic, is that kind of idea. Large list of possible options and a lot of things that you can do. For an action, for example, you can move, which is, ta-da, you can move to an adjacent space by using a connection. Again, if you're in Berlin, all spaces are adjacent. For an action, you can reveal the item that is stored in that location at the beginning of the game. For an action, you can pick it up and put it on your character card. That also reveals the deliver action, which is underneath. That means that usually these actions will allow you to gain a benefit by delivering certain items when you are there. For example, suppose that Hitler is present and you move there. Then basically for an action, you can discard the item indicated on the space to gain the corresponding advantage. For example, I'm there, Hitler is present, and I lower my suspicions by 2 by discarding any item. Oh my gosh, I forgot to tell you about suspicion. Back to the characters cards. How did that ever happen? Suspicion. You start at the medium level of suspicion. Again, you will want the suspicion to go as low as possible, but game effects will tend to increase the suspicion. When you're at extreme suspicion, you may get arrested, which is pretty terrible. Also, there is a number of symbols here. When you try to kill Hitler to perform a plot, you will roll dice, and you will need to roll a number of dice, a number of these symbols here lower than the indicated number. So if you're at extreme or a high suspicion, a single die that you roll in the dice pool that you use when trying to kill Hitler, a single symbol like that will cause you to fail. 2 symbols, 3 symbols. So you need to go below that number, pretty much to fly under the radar. Back to the actions that you can perform. So where were we? You can move, you can reveal an item, collect an item, deliver an item in a location, which is discard an item to take that advantage. Get a dossier card. Again, these resource cards here, super mega important. If one of your fellow co-conspirators has been arrested, and so you place their pawn in prison, you can go to the Gestapo HQ and you can spend an action to release them. Then you roll a die, and there's a small chance that you will get arrested because you have been a little too interested in this suspicious guy. Why would you want the guy to be released? But in most cases, the guy will be released. You can transfer dossier cards, again, pandemic style. If you're in the same location as another player, with another player, you can give or take cards for an action, for each card. And finally, of course, the action that we all want, which is the plots. Now, different plots will have different requirements and different things that will make it more likely for you to succeed. I'll give you some examples here. First, you need to make sure that you have all of the required things. Suppose we're trying to kidnap Hitler, then we need to be in the same space as Hitler, which makes sense. And Hitler may be in any Berlin 1 or 2 space. So those are the only places where we can kidnap the guy. This will give us a die. You always get a die, basically, if you can meet the requirements. Speaking of the dice, they have numbers between 1 and 3. 1 of these symbols here and 2 of these crosshairs here. So first we need to meet the requirement that gives us 1 die. And then we are going to get extra dice for each requirement that we have. For example, suppose the conspirator that is attempting this is of the Wehrmacht, then we have an extra die for that. Hooray! Weapons, multiples of these elements. Suppose the guy has 2 weapons, and suppose the guy also has a signature, then that is the pool of dice that we have. Again, remember also the constant motivation is that you need to be committed or reckless. Other things, for example, here, if you're trying the suitcase bomb, again, this is being the Wehrmacht is good. We have a different thing. And we have, if we have a badge, it doesn't give us a die, but allows us to ignore one of these negative symbols. We cannot do it in every space that we want. There is really, I don't know, I didn't realize that there could be so many ways of killing or at least removing somebody. Here you get 2 dice if all conspirators are in the same space. And so you have a lot of variety there, but it's not that they're not that easy. Resistance broadcast, again, you see different things that may happen. So basically, you collect all of your dice after you're sure you met all the requirements, and you roll them. And here are the possible results. here we're going to look at the play rate here, so that makes it easier. During this roll, we ignore the numbers, and so here's what happens. If the number of scary symbols here rolled is equal to or higher than, remember, our suspicion, well, the number of those symbols under our suspicion, so equal or higher, we are being caught. We ignore all the results, so we discard the attempted card, Hitler runs away, and we are arrested. Also, the other conspirators lower their motivation. It's possible that you don't roll too many of these, but you still don't roll enough of these. In which case the plot fails, but at least you're not detected, you don't suffer negative consequences. If you don't roll too many of these, more than the ones allowed by your suspicion, and you roll enough crosshairs to match or exceed the military support of Hitler, then you win the game. You lose the game if all players are arrested or if it's too late, basically if you run out of event cards. One last action that I didn't mention: for an action you can conspire, which means you can roll a die, one of these dice. So suppose that for 3 actions I can roll 3 dice. What happens here, each number that I roll is an extra action that I can still take. For example, now I have my 3 actions back. All dice that show the symbol are placed in an area on the descent track up there. When that is full, it is empty. It is immediately emptied, and the benefit is that a conspirator may raise their motivation by 1, or you can lower Hitler's military support by 1. However, alas, if when you're taking the conspire action you roll those symbols there, then the negative thing is that you raise your suspicion by 1 degree, say from low to medium, medium to high, and so on and so forth. And this is pretty much, in a nutshell, how you play Black Orchestra. I like this game a lot. I think it's a really fine game. It is smartly done. It has a very interesting engine. It has more luck than a lot of other cooperative games that I played. Say Pandemic comes to mind because there are just certain mechanical similarities, which there's nothing wrong with it. The game Black Orchestra is far from derivative. They just belong to the same family. Black Orchestra seems to be one of the many cooperative games inspired by Pandemic to an extent, but it has such a strong personality. And again, the dice element is important. Again, it has more luck there than maybe some of you would like. Maybe some of you would like to math things a little bit more, and you can't really do that. You have to swing with whatever luck is giving you. Take the opportunity when it presents itself. Roll with the punches when opportunity is not as pleasing as you like her to be. So dice, you roll well during the conspire action, you're gonna get 6 extra actions. Wow, super powerful. Or don't roll so well, all of a sudden you're at extreme suspicion. Also, which means that when an event card describing a Gestapo raid is going to be drawn at the end of a turn, you are gonna be arrested. Incidentally, when you're arrested, there is a very interesting procedure in which during your turn, all that you do is you draw an interrogation card, which gives you several options, which may be a little bit of a solo prisoner dilemma. You may choose to betray your co-conspirators, so they'll be forced to take certain penalties, increase suspicion, lower motivation, losing items, and that frees you, so they don't have to come and show up at the Gestapo headquarters trying to free you, or you can try to simply stay there and roll dice and hope that you're released. So there is that luck element when you take the conspiring actions, may be incredibly powerful, may allow you to increase motivation, extra actions, or may doom you. And then, of course, when it comes to the resolution itself, the acme, the quintessential moment, the moment of truth of the game is a roll of the dice, which means you may have done everything right and then you don't roll well once, twice, use that special action, card to reroll, and you still don't roll it. It may happen. And well, oh well, then you have a sense that in fact history, which I think the game really attempts to capture, is just more unpredictable and less nice to us than we like to think it is. As a wargamer, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with understanding that history and things that happen in history, especially in complex situations, are just unpredictable, and so a degree of randomness, although maybe disappointing when I lose, to me adds to the realism of the experience. But on the other hand, when you win, it's not gonna be a foregone conclusion. Yeah, of course, we did this and that, done, haha, done. It is always gonna be an adrenaline boost. There's always gonna be people cheering and jumping precisely because, well, you got lucky. But at the same time, although you do need luck to be on your side, at the same time you work very hard. You work very hard to collect the right resources. Again, a random element in the way the events will move Hitler and the deputies, and you have the right things to kill him in Berlin, and the guy goes to Nuremberg. Okay, fine, let's try and go there. And the guy moves again, which again, it means that you have to take that into account. And so players may, for example, spread around the board trying to catch him wherever he goes, trying to pursue different plans at the same time. But of course, there's a nice trade-off there. Nice because it's challenging, which is then you don't transfer resources from one another. You concentrate, transfer resources, plot, etc., etc., and then it's much harder to go, well, to spread around and get resources that may be in different locations. And in fact, this is a game that really is great from the point of view of the challenges that it presents, the nice trade-offs. Opportunity cost is the big dilemma here. You have a nice number of actions. Heck, you can spend actions to gain more actions if you're lucky. And there's just always more stuff to do than you're allowed to do. And that is perfect. That is exactly what you want from a challenging cooperative game. It's never easy. You always feel, oh, if only I had 2 or 3 or 40 actions more, I may make it. And then we're rolling dice to try to raise motivations, but then at the same time, you also need to do something to lower your suspicion and collect the right things. And there's a certain plot, but now I'm missing that one element. I'm asking somebody to go around Europe and look for the missing things. The different abilities of the characters also very nice. You can give out characters randomly at the beginning of the game, or again, there is a really nice, I think, choice here that the group can make in deciding the combination of different abilities that you can have. It is just a very solid cooperative game with a lot of tension, and it shows the dilemma, this interesting dilemma of history. At the beginning, killing Hitler may not be too hard because it doesn't have strong political military support. But people are like, I don't know, should I really risk to get shot? Should I really risk getting shot for this guy? Maybe it's not that bad. As things go bad and people are like, whoa, we gotta do something about it, then the guy gets surrounded by very strong military protection, which is going to decline towards the end. But if you're just there, let's bide our time, cross our fingers, etc., etc., by the end, Gestapo raids are gonna damage some of the players, and by the end, simply getting closer and closer to when the game is over. True, the military support will decrease throughout the game, later in the game, but again, that also means that time is running out. Very interesting historical elements that are represented in the game, and also turn into very interesting mechanics and into game conditions that will present you with a ton of different options and a ton of fun dilemmas. And this is what a good game is. It is a system that gives you interesting and tough choices, and Black Orchestra is simply swarming with those. I had a really good time playing it. I think it's an excellent cooperative game, and I would recommend it to, well, I guess pretty much anybody who is not uncomfortable with the theme. And well, I hope that there aren't many of you that are uncomfortable with the idea of killing Hitler. So in general, I think this is a game that will be pleasurable to play for many players.